All right, welcome back, everybody. If this is your first time to the channel, welcome to Notes to Fret, where we are all about turning theory into riffs. And in this series of videos, we are going to start our journey down the road of modes. In this video right here, it's definitely an introductory video for modes. But that being said, it's going to be very beneficial to anyone watching this video to have a pretty good grasp of at least the major scale and some knowledge of intervals. So with that being said, the introduction to modes really is going to kind of go over at a high level what constitutes a major mode, what constitutes a minor mode, some of the names, things along those lines, rather than diving into an individual mode by itself. We'll do that in later videos, but this video really is a high-level view of introduction to, again, the names of the modes, which ones are minor, what makes a minor, which ones are major, which ones make or what makes a major, things along those lines. So with that being said, when we're talking about major and minor modes, we have previously been discussing terms such as the major scale or the minor scale. We haven't used the term modes too terribly much, but realistically, the major scale is the Ionian mode. And therefore, the Ionian mode is a major mode. And that probably doesn't make a whole lot of sense right now, and that's fine. But when we talk about the modes are just different combinations of whole steps and half steps. So the Ionian mode, right, we have whole step, half step, whole step, half step. That's the major scale, and it's also the Ionian mode. So you may be thinking, well, how did we go from Ionian mode to the major scale? Well, the Ionian mode is a major mode, and it became the most popular. And so it just became the major scale. Same thing with minor, right? We have a lot of minor modes, but we often refer to the minor scale. And like I said, modes really are just a variation in the scale, right? It's just a different combination of whole steps and half steps. And the minor scale is really the Aeolian mode, right? So the minor scale as we know it is the Aeolian mode. Like I said, there's a lot of minor modes, but the Aeolian became the most popular minor mode, and so therefore it became the minor scale. So the major scale is really the Ionian mode, and the minor scale is really the Aeolian mode. Now, all of these names, this all right off the bat, sounds really confusing, sounds very bizarre, but the modes are extremely powerful, and they really help out your music writing once you understand them. So I think the first challenge, certainly for guitarists, is to just take a step back from the crazy names, right? Ionian, Aeolian. They have historical context. They don't roll off the tongue. They sound confusing. And just simply because of the names, a lot of people shy away from them. But don't do that, because they really are very powerful for your music writing. And we'll get into them. And, by the time you're done with this series, they'll all make perfect sense. So the first thing I want to do is revisit the major scale, right? In this case, the Ionian scale, right? The Ionian mode is the major scale. So the Ionian mode, i.e. the major scale, is whole step, half step, whole step, half step, right? That's it. And we've seen this before. Now, if you recall, going from the major scale to the minor scale, we just moved back a minor third, right? The half step and the whole step. And we go from C to A. Well, if you'll notice above the A, there's a 6, right? And we spoke about this in previous videos. That just means A is the 6th degree. So you could say the minor scale, the relative minor, is the 6th degree of the major scale, right? Because we have C major, the relative minor is A. So we could say that if we look at A, it's the 6th degree of the major scale. No problem, right? And that's what gives you your minor scale. Basically, we're going to take that A, which is at the 6th degree, and we're going to move it down, and we're just going to make that the 1st degree, right? Because now we're moving into minor. Well, that A is followed by a B. No different, right? It's followed by a B. And we know that B goes to C. We kind of go back to the beginning, but we have C, D, E, F, G, A, right? Those are the notes on our A minor scale. So if we look at this, we see that the relative minor is the 6th degree. It's gonna just sound hyper obnoxious when you say the Aeolian mode is the 6th degree of the Ionian mode. But how does that translate? The minor is the 6th note in the major scale, right? And so again, you know, it's just understanding a little bit of these naming conventions. But that aside, when we look at the A in the 6th degree of the major scale, it's followed immediately by a whole step. And all we need to do is just start counting our sequence of whole steps and half steps from that initial whole step. So here we have our A followed by a whole step, right? That's it. We just started counting from a different location in the scale. And so we wound up with this pattern, which we're calling our minor scale. Here, if we look at the top, we go from a whole step to a half step. And when we go back down towards the bottom, we go from a whole step to a half step. Next, we go from that half step to a whole step. Same exact thing. Half step to a whole step. Then back at the top, that whole step to a whole step. Down at the bottom, whole step to whole step. Again, back at the top, that whole step we just completed goes to a half step. Back down at the bottom, the exact same thing. That whole step goes to a half step. And back at the top, following that half step, it goes to a whole step. Back at the bottom, same exact thing. That half step goes to a whole step. And then finally at the top, that whole step goes to another whole step. And back at the bottom, that whole step goes to a whole step. So we can just kind of see where we start counting from different locations, or we start putting the whole step, half step combinations. We just start at a different location. That's really all a mode is. And here we've constructed the minor scale from the major scale, or we constructed the Aeolian mode from the Ionian mode. Okay? So a bunch of funky names, but we kind of moved through and we have a different scale, and we start on a different note. Right? And so as we look at this, we start to see that the modes really are just different positions in the major scale that we start counting from. In this case, we did the Aeolian mode, and that's the 6th degree. And then we just start counting from there. Now, I want to clean this up just a little bit. And as we're looking at these two modes, at the top is the major, right? The major scale, C major in this case, which is the Ionian mode. And at the bottom is the A minor scale, or the Aeolian mode. And up to this point, we've spoken about these scales being major and minor. And you've kind of trusted me on that, which I appreciate. But now it's kind of time that we need to prove it. Why are we saying that C major scale is major? And why are we saying this A minor scale is minor? Well, let's take a look at that. And what I want to do is clean this up and focus in on the major scale really quick. Just kind of as another PSA, in case anybody's here and they haven't seen some of the previous videos, when we talk about a semitone, that means 1 fret. Or we could say a half step is 1 fret. They all mean the same thing, right? So if I say move up 1 semitone or move up 1 half step, that just means move up 1 fret. Likewise, we can say move up a whole tone, or we could say move up a whole step, and that means 2 frets, right? For most of you, that's going to be review, but again, in case somebody's here and they haven't seen some of the previous videos, I just wanted to put that out there. Now, with that being said, in the intervals video, we talked about the third being quite possibly the most important interval you're ever going to learn, followed probably second by the octave, third by the fifth. But likely the most important interval is the third, and this is primarily why. When we're looking at our C major scale, we'll notice the number of frets that we have to move from the first degree, in this case C, to the third degree, which will be E. Now, in order to get to this E, we need to go from C to D, and we have a whole step, which is 2 frets. Then we go from D to E, which is another whole step, or 2 frets. Meaning, to get from C to E, we have to move up 4 frets. And if we recall, to get to this third, we move up those 4 frets. And if we recall from our intervals video, we say that 4 semitones, or 4 frets, is a major third. Okay? Now, let's just take a quick peek at the minor scale to understand that a little bit. Now again, here, we are still looking at our third. In this case, it's C, but the most important thing is that we're looking at the third degree. And what we need to do is, from the first to the second, we have a whole step, which is 2 frets. Then we have the second to the third, in this case is a half step, which is 1 fret. And so therefore, to get to our third degree in the scale, in this case the C, we had to move up 3 semitones, or 3 frets. And if we recall from the video on intervals, if we move up 3 semitones, or 3 frets, that is a minor third. All right? So let's just take a really quick look at that from a better graphical perspective. And again, you can see here that I've, faded out a lot of the information, because the only information we are even remotely concerned about to figure out whether it's a major or minor scale is we just have to evaluate up to the third. So here again, right, we're still looking at the third. In this case, it's E, but it doesn't matter what the note is. We're focused on the third. So when we go from C to D, we have a whole step, which is 2 frets. And when we go from D to E, it's another whole step, or 2 frets. Meaning we've moved up 4 frets, and we know that 4 frets is a major third. And so therefore, the Ionian mode is a major mode because of the major third. Okay? It's that simple. If there are 4 frets between the first degree and the third degree, it's major. That's it. Now let's take a really quick peek at the minor once more, just to kind of reiterate the concept. Here, again, we are still looking at the third. In this case, it's the C, but that's irrelevant. What's very important is that we're going to the third, meaning when we go from the first to the second, we have a whole step, which is 2 frets. And then when we go from the second to the third, we have a half step, which is 1 fret, meaning to get from A to C, or from the first to the third, we've moved up 3 frets. And as we know, 3 frets is a minor third. Therefore, the Aeolian mode is a minor mode because of the minor third. It's that simple. That's it. All you need to do to determine whether or not the mode is major is to see if it has 4 frets, or 4 semitones between the first and the third. And if it's minor, it will have 3 semitones between the first and the third. Okay? Now, we spoke about the modes of the major scale. We're calling everything the modes of the major scale. Why do we say of the major scale? Because we construct all of our modes from the major scale. We start with our major scale, just like we showed with the C major, and we constructed the A minor by starting on the sixth degree, and then that's how we just constructed the minor. We saw that earlier. Well, all the modes are like that. Every single mode of the major scale is exactly like that. We start with the major scale, and then we just start counting from different locations, okay? And that's why we talk about the modes of the major scale. And throughout this series, as we go through each one of the modes, we'll dive into this to the point by the time that you're finished with this series, you're probably going to get tired of listening to me say, modes of the major scale, but it'll make perfect sense to you. So first off, we talk about the Ionian mode. And the Ionian mode is our major scale. And how do we know that? Because we looked at the Ionian mode, and there were 4 frets, or 4 semitones, between the first note, in this case C, and the third, in this case E, right? So between the first and the third, there were 4 frets, so therefore it's a major mode. Next, we have the Dorian mode. Now, that's obnoxious. You don't know the first thing about the Dorian mode other than it has kind of a funky name. Well, I can also tell you that the Dorian mode is a minor mode. So now you know that the Dorian mode, whatever the third note is, or whatever the third degree, you know that there's 3 frets from the first to the third because it's a minor mode. Phrygian, interesting name, say that 5 times fast, but that's also a minor mode. So you don't know a lot about Phrygian, but you do know that there are only 3 semitones between the first and the third. Next we have Lydian, kind of a funky name, but that is a major mode. Again, you don't know a lot about the Lydian mode, but you do know that there's 4 frets between the first and the third. Same thing, the Mixolydian mode. That too is a major mode. Again, you don't know much about it, but you do know that there are 4 frets between the first and the third to make it a major third. Next, we've spoken about this scale, the Aeolian mode. It's a minor mode. This is the minor scale. Now, I mentioned that there were 7, and I'll get to the other one here in just a moment. But what I want to do is take a look at this because, really the funky names is typically the most off-putting component of learning the modes. But if you think about it, we already know the Ionian mode, right? That's the major scale. So we know Ionian is major. Fine. Well, if we look down, if we see Lydian or Mixolydian, those also are major modes. So basically, if the name has the term Lydian in it, you know it's major. The only other one that you need to worry about is Ionian, right? That is the major scale. So you kind of know that one. So Lydian, Mixolydian, they're both major because they have Lydian in them. And then you know Ionian. So if somebody came up to you and said, hey, is the Phrygian mode major or minor? You'd say, well, it doesn't have the term Lydian in it, so it's minor. Just take a shot in the dark and you're pretty good, right? Also didn't have the name Ionian in it. Same thing, right? If someone says, is Dorian major or minor? Well, it doesn't have the word Lydian or Ionian in it, so therefore, just take a shot in the dark. It's minor, and you'll be good. Now, I did mention that there's a 7th one. In this case, it's the Locrian mode. Well, this too is a minor mode, but it's a very weird minor mode. We'll get into it. You'll hear this one referred to as the diminished mode. Don't worry about that for the time being. If you're familiar with Locrian and you know why it's called diminished, then you get it. But when we go through the video on Locrian, I'll explain why it's kind of a minor scale, but it's referred to as diminished oftentimes. I'll go over that. It's very simple, very straightforward. Just needs a little bit of explanation. But anyways, these are the 7 modes. And you can see the major and the minor, right? Again, if it has the name Lydian anywhere in it, or Ionian, it's major. And if not, it's minor. So the next thing I want to point out is that each one of these are degree. The Ionian is the first degree, the Dorian is the second degree, Phrygian third degree, Lydian fourth degree, Mixolydian fifth degree, Aeolian sixth degree, and this is what we looked at earlier in the video when we were looking at the A minor in the C major scale, right? It had that 6 above it, and that was the 6th degree. And then the Locrian is the 7th degree. And we'll talk more about this as we go through in the individual modes, each individual video. But it's the only thing that's really important is just to remember them in this order. It is important to recognize that Aeolian is the 6th degree, right? It's you don't want to think of Aeolian as the second or anything else. So you do want to remember them in this order. And the reason you want that is because these degrees match up very particular. So because of that, there are some catchy phrases to remember the order of these modes. The phrase that I like to use is "I don't punch like Muhammad Ali," and I kind of double with that L, and that gives me a good idea on memorizing the modes. I've heard another one. I don't play loud music. I don't play loud music at lunch. Right? If that works better for you, that's cool too. But just remember that the modes, they're either major or minor, and now we understand how to look at them and figure out if they're major or minor. Right? It's just whether or not it's a major third or a minor third. Or you can look, does it have the term Lydian in it or the name Ionian? If the answer is yes, it's major. If the answer is no, it's minor, right? However you want to look at it. And then just remember them in this order because the first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh degree, that does matter. So this is the initial overview of modes, just so you get an idea. You get a little bit of familiarity with the names. But we will be diving into each one individually. So by the time we're finished with the video series, you'll understand them. I think the important thing here is to understand the major and the minor thirds. Don't worry about the names. They just make it sound confusing, but it's really not. And we'll look at these from a perspective of music construction because they can really add something to your music to make it very unique to the listener. So anyways, with all that being said, in the next video, we're going to be diving directly into the Dorian mode, and we will see you in that next video. Take care, everybody.